Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning. This is Minhaj, and we are back with another episode. Today, we have Vance Stevens, who is an expert in computer-assisted language learning. He has taught English as second language for 40 years now. He has a long resume that I'd rather he explained himself. He's been a very good friend and mentor for a long time now. Hi, Vance.
Hey, coffee. How are you doing?
Absolutely necessary in the morning.
It's iced coffee, so that's why the spoon is here. It's got ice chunks in it.
How cold is that in that part of the world? I don't think it gets very cold, does it?
No. Someone commented to me, "Well, you're north of the equator," and I figured, yeah, it's about 200 kilometers north of the equator. It's it gets. I think it's about 26 degrees now, and it's pretty. It's cold. It gets hotter. It's in the 30s, but right now it's pretty cool.
Okay, I think for many countries that'd be more like summers, no?
Yeah, it's actually a very pleasant summer kind of weather right now, and it stays this way through Christmas into January maybe, and it starts getting hot again. So, but Malaysia is kind of pleasant for a lot of the year, sort of like UAE. UAE was very pleasant in the wintertime, and then the summertime, better get on a plane, But
Fair
here it's
enough.
it's nice all year round.
Okay, I think we have the same, about same temperature. So because we don't have the snowy winter that most people are having at the time, I guess.
So, well, it depends on what part of Pakistan you're in. So, where are you in exactly?
Oh, that's for sure. I am more of a south, like middle south, so it's kind of warm, more of a UAE kind of temperature. But up north, definitely it's snowing.
Yeah, we're familiar with Pakistan. We've been there several times. Lahore, Karachi. Karachi's on the coast.
When was that?
Let's see. Several times, I guess. So one time we went through was the year that Khomeini died, and Tiananmen Square was, I think that was 1988, maybe, or 1989. So that's one of our trips. Recently, I can't remember if we've been there recently, but yeah, and that trip I went up to Kashgar in China. So and I went over the Karakoram Pass.
Oh, very nice. Should we bring Bobbi also online?
Sure.
Bobbi is Vance's wife and a teacher of kindergarten. Hi, Bobbi.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. It's been a while.
Are you getting feedback on the mics?
Yes. Yeah, from you.
Okay, I will plug in, and maybe can I mute myself, or?
I guess
so.
I
gotta mute switch. Okay.
Yeah, but it's not a problem.
No, it isn't a big problem. How are you, Bobbi?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I think good. I think last time we met, you were teaching in Abu Dhabi in kindergarten, was that?
Yes, I was teaching at the American Community School of Abu Dhabi, and the school is U.S. Curriculum, but we had children from all different nationalities, as you would in a multicultural community like that. So, yeah.
Okay. And are you still teaching?
I'm not. I'm doing the retirement things, gardening, and kind of trying to digitize our photos that we've had for many years, and enjoying grandkids and things like that. So
nice. Vance did tell me that you scanned some of our photos that we had back in Abu Dhabi. So we'll be actually sharing some of that
Yeah.
later in down the podcast. I don't actually believe I was that thin at any point in time of my life.
Oh, yeah, you look so young. I guess we all did. Yeah.
I guess.
It's-
Well, Bobbi, we on our show we bring a lot of people who have done remarkable things in their careers and has a lifelong service in their field of expertise. And you, as a couple, I remember, were very active in a lot of English language teaching communities. You were one of the spearheading founders of ESL and then Webheads and Electronic Village, and then learning together. That was one of the phases in my life which I benefited a lot from your mentorship, and we've got a lot of friends through that community. And now that I've got my own company, and we teach a lot of young researchers and aspiring teachers and scientists. We really bring people like you on to narrate a little bit of what your challenges were during those times developing new talent, and what are the strategies that you used. And we're going to be talking a lot about this with Vance and his work. And I remember that you at that time were also working with children, and that's very different from what Vance does. So he mostly does work with higher education and teachers, and writing papers and books, and publishing in different journals. But you, on the other hand, work with very grassroots. In general, you would have more people at your disposal than Vance would at any point, because as we go up the ladder of higher education, enrollment becomes less and less. So there will be more children in school than you would find in a PhD classroom. So what was your experience learning English as a second language using computer-assisted tools back in your time, and how did it actually help the learning curve?
Well, when I first started teaching, we just had one computer. It was an Apple in the classroom, and it was basically, we had educational games, and the children had to take turns using that computer. And that was back in California. Then when I moved to the UAE, then when I was teaching in the UAE at ACS, American Community School, kindergarten level, in the beginning, they had the children in kindergarten go once or twice a week, depending on how the schedule worked out, to a computer lab where each child sat at desktop computer. And there again, the idea was to familiarize the children with computers, and also games that taught numbers and letters. And then towards the end, we moved into having iPads in the classroom, which gave us so much more flexibility, that the children could take the iPads outside in the garden and work, and use what really changed with having the iPads. We used technology to support our themes more, since the children had more mobility and flexibility and more choices by then. So, but we found it very useful. And now I can see, although I'm not teaching myself, I have a grandson. He's 3 years old, and he's in Doha. And they can't go to school every day because of COVID. And last year, before he started this specific school, and he was in a pre-K program, they had to stop going to school completely, and they were doing classes on Zoom, which amazed me to see the little children going onto Zoom. And I really admire teachers now who are able to do that. And so now Kai He's going to school, I think, twice a week, and then 3 days a week they're having classes on Zoom. And he's learning. I can see he's going to a Spanish-based school, so he's learning Spanish. He's learning Arabic. They're doing number games. They're still doing a lot of activities, but I can see now how it would have been useful to me if I were teaching now the background that I was getting years ago. So,
what I find really interesting is that you also studied sociology, late 60s back home.
I did, yes.
And from a cultural perspective, and from because we do a lot of work with human behavior and the cognitive psychology that helps us give a window into how people actually learn. Do you really think that digitization of language acquisition has been for the good in all aspects? Because if I remember how we used to learn back home when we started our journey in schools learning English, it was more like you have to memorize the alphabets and the conjugation, and then you have to reproduce it, you have to write essays. Everything was more of a written and reading orientation things that had no digital aspect of that. Well, now it certainly has helped us a lot when we have iPads and computers and SecondLife and more interactive experiences. But do you at some point also think that it has minimized the human contact in language learning, and eventually language is something that you would use in more of a practical real life scenario, not online? So what's your take on that, especially with children?
Well, there are some children that I found that learn very well in the old-fashioned method, but the children who fell beneath the cracks, in between the cracks, were often the ones who benefited from alternative ways of learning. So I don't think that we should completely say that the old way of learning is, let's do away with it completely, but it's great that we have alternatives now. And I did find that some children, they learn in different ways, language or whatever, and by giving them an option to learn using different tools, it brings out the best in some students who weren't maybe getting it in other ways. So yeah, so I think it's been useful with little children. I do believe that if it's possible, face-to-face is a great way to teach them. But if that's not possible, giving them different opportunities, it's great that we have these now, these different methods of learning.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I noticed in your work is that you have pretty much covered the both spectrums of teaching. You at some point have taught short courses in effective leadership and emotional intelligence and communication skills to bankers, which is presumably very different from your younger children. How did that go? Do you think digitization in that arena was as helpful?
Yeah, well, it definitely was, because we could give working with adults, I could give them the work beforehand, or they could look it over before we had class, if they were willing to do that. Still, a lot of students don't take advantage of that, so they walk in completely fresh. But if the students would look at the work before class, they already had some idea of what we were going to do, and maybe looked some things up and did some research before class, and they had that advantage. The big difference I noticed between, because I taught young children first and I taught later adults, is I could sit down in class. That never happened in kindergarten. And so it was just a completely different atmosphere, but it was good to do both ways. And, my love is teaching children, but I still enjoyed teaching adults. And the Emiratis, I was teaching Emiratis, and they were very gracious students, and it was good for me to be able to teach a class of total non-English language speakers.
Okay. Before we actually bring Vance on and talk more about adults, so if we were to give you a choice between children and Emirati bankers, it would always be children, right?
It would always be children, yeah.
All
More
right. Thank you so
rewarding,
much.
yeah. Thank
Thank you so
you.
much, Bobbi, for joining us.
My
And
pleasure.
once again, hope to see you more often in the future.
I hope so. Nice to see you again, and good luck with everything.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Vance.
Okay. Hi.
Some time that I've seen Bobbi.
Yeah. It's nice of you to ask Bobbi to join us.
Exactly. So, Vance, there's a lot of things to talk about, but before we actually do, I think I am a little bit lazier today in introducing you because you have a long resume, and I would rather you do that than I do. Because when it comes to computer-assisted language learning, I don't know of anyone who has a longer career, more accomplishments, loads of publications. You sit on different advisory boards. You have numerous books and chapters published. I think you're on your fifth 100. I think you've already passed that, like 500 episodes of learning.
500. This is Learning Together episode 501. And anytime I give a Learning Together episode, I always give the date. This is December 6th, 2020. And I'm speaking here with Minhaj Rahman.
So take it away and tell our viewers a little bit about
Learning Together.
What you have done. What do you do as both a producer of knowledge and consumer of knowledge, and your experience on computer-assisted language?
Okay. As we were discussing earlier, I actually got into computers I was in Saudi Arabia, and we were teaching in a traditional way. The students would come to class. We first had chalkboards, and sometimes the cleaners would come in and wax the boards, and because they waxed everything, they cleaned everything, and then they would just wipe the boards. And then we'd come in the morning, and we couldn't write on the boards because they had waxed the board. So eventually they solved that problem. I think they got some kind of whiteboard markers in, but this is back in the mid-70s. Sorry, it's back in the mid-70s. So at about that time, they had a computer center our language center was at the base at University of Petroleum and Minerals, now I think called King Khalid University of Petroleum and Minerals, in Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. And they had a computer center on the hill, and they brought a computer down to the language center, and they just put it there, and they didn't tell anybody what it was there for. I passed it many times. At some point, I went in and I started playing around with it, and to see, well, what does it do? And my boss, the director, came by, and he saw me in there. He said, "Oh, kind of like that." Yeah. Anyway, to make a long story short, he put me in charge of a program to develop computer-assisted language learning, or we called it CAI back then, computer-assisted instruction. And it was kind of instruction because we put together a program which basically did drill and practice for the students and just gave them a computer component, nothing like what we do with computers these days. But that was in 1979. I think I wrote one of my first articles on computers. And then in 1981, I went to the University of Hawaii to do my MA. And I did that on, my dissertation was on research in various options in implementing computer-assisted instruction. My first job after that was at a preparatory academy where I headed up program for the ESL students there. And I had all ages, but I got them onto computers. I got computers there, which was kind of an unusual thing. I had to actually make a request to have computers installed for me, Apple computers. And as I was saying yesterday, actually, I had to go and pirate software to get it onto the computers, or not pirate it really. I got public domain software, and I repurposed it so that we could use it. And from there, I was always active in TESOL at the time. I think my first TESOL conference was in 1976. That's actually how I got my job in Saudi Arabia. I think the next one after that, I was in Hawaii, and I started meeting people who were developing computers at the time. And I got to know them. I was invited in 1983, I believe, to a symposium in Toronto, and I believe that's correct. Yeah. So, and I went there, and we formed. That's where the computer-assisted language learning intersection came about. It started there with that symposium, and I became the first chair of that intersection. And I think that was in 1985 that we formed that. And by the summer of that year, I had got a job in Oman, where I was an instructional developer there. My job was to take care of a learning resource center, and it had computers, of course. And I was kind of the computer person for the language center there. I stayed there for 10 years, and moved after that. After 10 years, I got a job in California, working as a software developer. And I met a guy there named Phil Hubbard. I don't know if you know who Phil Hubbard is. He's at Stanford University. He and I and some other people put together a program on CD. Sorry about the sirens outside. I think they're bringing COVID patients in from somewhere and parking them over here, and they do this frequently. Anyway. So
as long as it's not a robbery, it's fine.
No, it's actually normal. So anyhow, in California, we developed something called Tracy Talk, which we were making CDs for Apple and Apple operating system and DOS operating systems. And the CD was a game involving speech recognition. The students would speak to characters on the screen, and according to what they said, the program would branch, and they had to solve a mystery. And I got to go to places like Chile and demonstrate it. And so that was a very interesting work. I don't know if it plays anymore because that's old. I think I've heard that it's very hard to get it running now, but although I still have a CD around. So from California, I got invited to be a consultant, work as a consultant to develop a language center at or I should say the computer component of a language center in Abu Dhabi. It's called the Military Language Institute. And I was there for several years, and also I got into Webheads about this time. Webheads, well, when I was in California working for a software company, I missed teaching, but I managed to get myself do online teaching, just using email. But we also used things like multi-user dungeons, or whatever you call them, so we went to spaces, virtual spaces, where people could meet and interact with each other. It was very interesting. And we also used voice software. We could plug it into your browser, and then you could speak to each other. It was all very innovative at the time. And so it was using these tools that I met other people teaching in the same program, using the same tools that I was using, which a lot of people are still using email, but we were using the what they used to call 3D language learning. The person who put the students and the teachers together asked students if they're interested in 3D language learning, and if they were, they came to us. So anyway, to make a very long story short, that I made a web page for our group and called the group Writing for Webheads. It wasn't really a writing course. It was basically, we found out one interesting thing at the time, and that was that the students weren't there so much to learn writing, called it writing, or maybe some people took grammar courses, but that wasn't the way it worked. The students really liked the environment we had set up. They liked to come together and talk to each other. And so I took whatever they wrote and I put it on my web pages. So we had writing from the students all over the place, but what they really enjoyed was meeting one another. And we started displaying at conferences, online conferences at first. Then when I would go to TESOL conferences, I even got invited to be a featured speaker at one, where I had the students up on the screen behind me and they were talking to one another at a time when this just wasn't done. It's eye-opening for everybody, including myself. So it got to where teachers were getting interested in what we were doing, and teachers started joining Writing for Webheads. And eventually the teachers started suppressing the student voices. So the students didn't feel so comfortable being around so many teachers talking about other things. So at about that time, Electronic Village Online was starting. EVO started in 2001, and in 2002, I was asked to put on to make a course, or what we call sessions, and they last for 5 weeks. And mine was called Webheads in Action. So my idea was to pull the language teachers into this group and show them how we set up this environment where they could interact with each other and form what we learned within a year. In 2003, we were talking about communities of practice. We did a presentation at, we actually put it, we put it online beforehand. We interacted beforehand. We came to the conference and we brought some people in from overseas. And we started calling ourselves a community of practice based on Etienne Weir's work. And that was another novel concept at the time. And so we started learning about how these groups formed. It wasn't just magic. Interestingly, we're talking about 2002 for Webheads in Action. Now it's almost 20 years later. We're still together. We're still meeting. I've sort of merged that into other things. I morphed it. I don't talk about Webheads so much, although it always comes up, because a lot of the people who participate in the things that I do are Webheads or call themselves Webheads. They even come to conferences and they call themselves Webheads. Webheads got so popular that I was asked to write an article about it in the TESOL Encyclopedia of English Language Teaching, which is a multi-volume work on with various articles on many topics. So under W, there's Webheads. So if you want to read the definitive work on Webheads, all you have to do is go to the encyclopedia. So anyhow, so one thing that was happening about that time, there were, as I mentioned, we had been taking our Webhead students to online conferences. These online conferences usually had you had to pay for them. And one of the things we had to do with the students was we had to get them into the conference without paying. And I had to write people and say, well, I want to bring my students here, and they'd say, okay, let them in for free. But it was always a little bit of a hassle. And I got to thinking that we really needed conferences where you didn't have to put down a credit card. And I thought Webheads was in a really good position to do that. So in 2005, Webheads kind of got together and put on something we called the Webheads in Action Online Convergence. We did it in 2005, again 2007, and again in 2009. And I'll tell you what happened after that in a moment. But this is at a time when in 2006, there's something called a K-12 online conference, which was a free conference put on by K-12 teachers in the United States coming together with Web 2.0. They were getting together and leveraging their work and leveraging their connections. That was the first free online conference, and theirs was asynchronous, so people made presentations, but we held 3-day conferences, 72 hours straight, since we were all over the world, no time zones, no sleep. Well, we did catch naps every now and then, but basically, there's 3 conferences in 2005, 7, and 9. Very taxing. You couldn't do it every year. So in 2009, I started casting around, well, who wants to do it in 2011? Nobody wanted the bill. I was trying to hang on that cat. So I thought, well, look, there's got to be a better way. So I came up with the concept of learning together. And I decided, instead of having every 2 years, 72 presentations, it wouldn't be 72, it'd be more like 65, because not every slot was filled. But I would, instead of having like 65 in 2 years, you could have maybe once a week, you'd have 100, 100 in 2 years. So you could actually do it better, more efficiently, and at a much nicer pace if you just did one once a week. So I started doing that in 2000. Well, in 2009 we started doing it, but in 2010, I think our first episode really is in 2009. Somebody warmed up to the idea and did a first one. We talk about it at learningtogether.net in the last episode we published, because we had a party. The Learning Together has just had its 500th episode. This is 501. And at the 500th episode, we had a big party. And it's quite interesting to watch. And you get a good flavor of Webheads, because mostly Webheads were there. But of course, Learning Together involves anybody who wants to do it. All of the episodes, there's an archive index of all the episodes, all 500 episodes. So if you go to learningtogether.net, you can find, there's an About tab, and you can go to the About tab, and you can find the page where we list all 500 episodes. I know Minhaj thought it should be a little bit, that's too much text. Yeah, okay, I agree with that. But keep in mind, we've been doing this for 10 years for Learning Together. But in any event, so that's kind of where I have been for the last 10 years. And meanwhile, EVO, Electronic Village Online, has also been going on. That happens every year in January and February. So we've got one coming up. If you're interested in EVO, you go to evosessions.com or evosessions.org. Sorry, not evosessions.com, evosessions.pbworks.com, or evosessions.org will get you there as well. So I've been a coordinator. In 2002, when I did my Webheads in Action online event, EVO event, in 2003, they asked me to be a coordinator. So I've been a coordinator since then, and I'm involved in, I've put on many different sessions. I did one on multiliteracies for about 10 years. Webheads in Action went on for quite a long time until I sort of came away from it, and then someone put it on something called Becoming a Webhead, and that went on for another 10 years. So these things, they tend to just keep going. But my latest Webheads, my latest, EVO session for the last 6 years, I think we're coming on number 7 right now, since 2015, our first one, was EVO Minecraft MOOC. The reason I got into Minecraft was, I think Minecraft came out as a game in 2008, And by 2009, teachers were starting to really get attuned to this game. And and I mentioned the group, the K-12 online conference. This group that put that online in 2006 was doing a lot of podcasts, and a lot of us were kind of coming together in this podcastosphere, I suppose, with talking about education. And so, so they were talking at the time about Minecraft, and I got really interested. There was somebody named Levin. I can't remember his first name. Anyway,
Vance, I'm just wondering, because these are some very interesting things that you've been doing. So I wanted to get into it deeply, individually. So, but what I wanted to start from is, if that's okay, about some of the work that you have done is very much ahead of time. Now that I'm working a lot at the intersection of artificial intelligence, linking with psychology, cognitive psychology, learning, personality psychology, and its application in education and business. And I'm using tools that are developed on the basic principles that you were working quite early on. For example, when you were working back home for the software company, you did mention a lot of work on summation and lemmatization, and how does computer programming language discern different conjugations of same verbs like work, working, worked, has worked, have been worked, and a lot of permutations of the same verbs. And now you've gotten to a point where we have different libraries. One of them is developed by Google, and then we have different version of that. So we've got BERT and we have got Roberta, and then I think we've got one more Distilled or something, and then we have Hugging Face. A lot of these tools have now evolved into a whole new field called natural language processing. So if you could briefly tell me how did you actually get into that field, and what was your work back then, because you certainly were at the cusp of something that turned out to be amazing, for not only for language learning but also for a lot of applications that we use today. Some of the applications would be, if you go to a website, there's a chatbot, and then it asks you for your reason for the visit. And once you write it down, it matches it with all the information that it has, and then it gives you the information you would particularly need. And I think you told me about this robot, kind of in a simulation that you were working on. And if you gave them the numbers, it would gladly take it. But if you didn't, if it was something else but numbers, it would just excuse itself from servicing you. So just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we were talking about speech recognition, and there are two kinds of speech recognition. There's one that will understand what you say and will then spit it back at you in text or whatever, and that one has to understand what you are saying. Okay, so and you have to train that actually. The other kind is that the kind that I was working with was the kind where if you give it a range of things to look for, it will sit and listen for those things. So the example I gave you was that if you call up a credit card company and say, okay, give me what's your credit card number? And then if you say, I'm sorry, I don't have a credit card, it will say, sorry, I didn't catch that. Please give me your credit card number. So it can get nonsensical, but what you're supposed to say is 1, 5, 7, 6, 9, things like that. So as long as you give it something that it anticipates, then it can respond. It says, oh, I think you said 1, 7, 6, 5, 9, etc. So it seems to understand you. Well, in the game that I mentioned called Tracy Talk, we had we were working with the discrete kind, the one that will only recognize what you tell it to look for. It's called Tracy Talk because Tracy stood for teacher ranging across the computer interface. And you could, for example, say at any time you got stuck, you could say, Tracy. It was kind of like you're carrying a personal digital assistant with you. We didn't have smartphones back then. Okay, so this was in 1995 or 6 or 7. Yeah, I was in California from 1995 to 1997. So the internet had just become popular with teachers at the time. Anyway, so Tracy was one of the things that was listening for. And also at any given juncture, we could tell it specifically what the student might say, because we would tell the student on someone might say, oh, why are you going to Springfield? And the choices would be, I've got a job there, or I can't tell you, it's a secret, or none of your business. Okay, so, and now the computer would say, when the character in the program asked that question, up on the screen you'd see those 3 things to say, and you had to say one of those 3 things. The student could turn off the prompts and try to do it from memory. That was the idea. That was maybe where the language learning kind of would kick in. But basically, the program told the student what they could say, and what I had to do was tweak the software to make sure that the computer could understand what the student said, because English speakers are not going to tell you, or I should say are not going to tell you, or, so you don't know what they're going to say. They might, what'd you say? What did you say? What's that you said? So basically I had to anticipate with the different allophones that the students might come up with, and I had to build them into the responses. So, and test that on people. Anyway, and also we were talking as far as lemmatization was concerned. Those studies, my own interest in that kind of approach was in text analysis and concordancing. I'd written a number of things on concordancing. In fact, one of the books that I published with Martha Pennington, they asked me to write the index for it. They couldn't get anybody else to do it, and they talked me into it. How do you write an index, So I thought, well, okay, I got the text of the book. I just concordanced it all, I got all the words out of it, and I got rid of all the does and all those and everything like that. Everything was left, I put in the index. And in one of the reviews, it said, the book is really well indexed. That was the only reward I ever got for doing all that work. But in any event, so concordancing is also a data-driven approach to learning. You can let students use concordancers. Going back to that book that I co-edited with Martha Pennington, probably about 1989, something like that. It had articles in it. Some of the edited articles were by lists who at the time were, because they had come to this conference where we put this book together, and they were doing the analyses on having the computer, and there were other people at the time also working on how do you get computers to, or how do you parse text? What they wanted in their text analysis studies, they wanted to be able to not have to hand tag everything. They were previously having to tag huge text, but of course they couldn't do too much because it was limited. So they're designing programs where the computer would, they could feed it text and the computer could do the tagging. And that's where lemmatization comes in. That was part of their, they had to have the computer determine what those were. So that's actually kind of at the groundwork the work that was going on back then was the groundwork you're talking about, which is building into artificial intelligence, which has gone leaps and bounds since then. You're coming in at a very good time.
I guess so. One of the things that I noticed that not only did you actually were at the forerunner of all this, you also got to implement these things in your teaching in real life. So I believe you were teaching in Abu Dhabi to a lot of pilots where you actually designed the curriculum for their courses, and you also design courses for a lot of other walks of life. And I'm just wondering, did you actually get the chance to put some of those principles in action using computer-assisted language learning, or those summarization and lemmatization principles into your teaching to see, if that has improved some of the learning, or that has actually shortened some of the learning curve for the participants?
Not the linguistic ones so much. The ones that I applied were more on the community of practice side, what I had learned about bringing communities online. So when it's colored my teaching for a very long time. Whenever I teach people, the web page I made for Webheads and for writing for Webheads, those guys, I actually got that idea from one of my students who developed a web page for one of those first courses where we were just doing an email. He knew how to make web pages, so he said, "Well, I'll make you one for this course," and that was so neat. It was a real eye opener, So that's what got me into learning HTML, and what made me make a web page for the Webheads, the writing for Webheads that we started up in we're not sure exactly when we started. We started archiving them in 1998. So that idea that you can put up a web page, in fact, back then, people didn't like to send pictures for such web pages. Facebook came along in 2006, I believe, or is it 2004? I can't remember. Moodle maybe came around in 2006. I can't remember which. One is web page, one is Moodle. Both pages had the idea that people give their pictures and put the pictures online. Before that, it was really difficult to get people to do that. So what we did before that was we had taken pictures from participants and put the pictures in galleries, front page galleries online. So you could see, as we accumulated participants, the gallery would grow. First, it was just a 3x3 table of a few participants, but pretty soon it got to be a 10x10. So these pictures were really compelling. And Facebook has built a whole model on it. And Moodle, that was one of the innovations in Moodle that maybe you're not aware, but that was one of the first times that a picture was actually associated with events in a learning management system. So that kind of thing where you figure out what brings people together is what I was learning by doing and then bringing into my courses. So every course I taught from then had some kind of web page. It's called blended learning nowadays. That is, you meet the students face to face, but there's an online component back there, and you try to build a community in your classroom, and also you use it to put down the work that they have that day, and the work they had yesterday, and the work the class before had last year. You can archive just as much as you want, and you can tell them what you're going to do, and you make everything clear. If you have to use someone else's, like Blackboard, for example, which I detest actually. If I had to use it, I would use it. I would put up my course, but then I would send everything out to the wiki. And if I tried to get the students to go on Blackboard on their iPads, it was so frustrating. Sometimes it wouldn't connect. Sometimes they didn't know the login, but if I put the link to the content in my wiki, they could just go into the wiki and they hit the link and bling, brings it up. So it just cut corners and didn't really have to put the content itself in my wiki. But so that kind of thing is what I've been applying to every course I've taught. And that's become very significant now that we're in COVID times. Now that people are going into hybrid teaching, which was what Bobbi was talking about. Our grandson goes to school 2 days a week, and other days he does it online. And possibly the other days, the students are rotating in. So it could be the teacher is juggling face-to-face students and a few online students at the same time and having to set up these environments. So this took people by surprise in March of this year. I was teaching a blended learning course in Thailand at the time. I went to Thailand and I did it in January, and they had somehow built in an e-learning component for it in February. And so the idea was that I teach a course in Thailand, and I would invite the students to come join me in a course that I had to put on in February. I put it on in Schoology. It's a nice, easy little thing. It looks like Moodle, but it's much easier and much more intuitive, and you can put it up very quickly. So, so I put something up in Schoology, and I used the content from my blended learning courses, and I kind of put all that together, sort of like piecemeal components where I didn't have to go out and reinvent everything. It all fit together. And that's and people got kind of lukewarm reception when I started in February, but by March, schools were starting to close. People started, oh, wait a minute, what did he just say? How do we do this? It became obvious that people who were already doing it were in a much better position to go into what they were being forced to do in their school environments. People who hadn't been doing it were hope there's someone around who was doing it who could tell the rest of us how, because this was that was a real awakener for most people. In fact, that has emergency remote teaching is what it's been known as, ERT. So emergency remote teaching was a phase that happened maybe, and at that time, at the emergency remote teaching time, I developed a little community of practice called Talon, Teaching and Learning in Isolation. And we put on 30 webinars. So, and I was kind of carrying that on at the end of my e-learning course because I sort of I had the bug, I couldn't really stop. And so I was bringing teachers together in these Talon events. But then it became apparent that people were getting, oh, now we know how to do it. The teachers are very adaptable and they learn through necessity. And so it wasn't emergency remote teaching anymore. And at that time also it was blending that with the learning together, which I already had. So I just kind of, I called Talon 2 or Talon Squared, TALINN, Teaching and Learning in the New Normal. So, and I really haven't perpetuated that, but that's...
Isn't that a city in Estonia also, no?
Sorry?
Tallinn is also a city in Estonia.
Yes, it's spelled differently. I think it has 2 L's.
Or the 2 N's.
2 N's. You might be right. Oh, that's the new normal. So that's what Tallinn means. Oh, okay.
I have no idea. I mean, I'm just guessing, because it's pretty sure there's a city with a similar name.
Yeah, I remember that was pointed out to me, but it does have a different spelling.
Oh, there's something specific I wanted to actually talk about, which is that, we were back when we met in 2006, and even before that, we're working on some of the tools that were even ahead of times for a lot of other teachers around the world. So we were probably, if not the first, but on an earlier bandwagon, SecondLife. So still remember, I think I've gotten my first $100 from Kip in the fireside chat that we used to have. And then a lot of people that were part of the community, they had their avatars there, and Nelly and Erges, and I remember you there at some point also. And you have done a lot of work that now has gotten to a point that it's almost a virtual reality learning with VR, Oculus, and hologram, and a lot of other technologies that are quite similar, or let's say our advanced version of what we used to use back then. You've also worked with a lot of gamification that we were going to be talking about shortly. We at SciDive, we are also business partners with a lot of these tools that are based on natural language processing, like MAXQDA, which is a qualitative data analysis software, and then we have Ref and Write, which helps speakers of English as second language to write scientific and academic research papers, and various other tools. So the good part is that we spearheaded a lot of these things earlier in time when things were not the way they are now. So one of the things that I especially would like to share is probably proceeding. It is actually the proceeding of one of the papers that you wrote. Let me actually go ahead and share that.
By the way, you can find all my papers at vancestevens.com/papers.
Yes, I actually did share it already with a lot of viewers with your resume, so you can go ahead and actually see that. So that's one of the papers, or was it gone from proceeding, that actually wrote, in which you talked about Minecraft as a gamification technology for teaching. If you could just tell a little bit about what it was and how did the idea generate? Did you actually went to Chile and present that?
Yes, I was in Concepcion presenting that, and it's a learning together. I made it a learning together exercise or an episode. So if you go to learningtogether.net, or if you go to the archive, then you can search for Concepcion and you can find the pictures that go with that and all that. And that's one of many papers that I've written on Minecraft. Trying to think where I've got the, I think it EVO Minecraft, no, see, missions for Minecraft. Shall I look it up? Do you want me to find more information here and share it, or? I'm gonna have to look for the missions for Minecraft. I hope I've got, I know where I've got it. Okay, so actually it's on a document that we're working on. I don't think it's, well, yeah, you can see some things that we've written over here. Okay, so missions for Minecraft. I'll just put the link in the text chat. And there are a few things there, but we've done quite a lot of work on Minecraft. And so the idea, and I've written an article. If you go to Vance Stevens, I got vancestevens.com/papers. You can find the article I wrote with Jeff Kuhn, Kuhn. And that one talks about participatory cultures and how the importance of Minecraft in language learning. Jeff wrote an article in a book called The Minecraft Teacher, or something like that. Anyway, there's a whole manual about teaching in Minecraft. And this is the thing that attracted me back in 2009, when all these K-12 teachers were explaining how they were using it with their students. They got a lot of feedback from other teachers saying, well, hang on, is this in the curriculum? And they'd say, well, no, the curriculum is in it. So another teacher in Dubai, at one of the conferences where I presented on that, she came on and she talked about Minecraft and what she had done. In her class, she had noticed in her class that during breaks her students were playing Minecraft. And so she would go over and talk to them, because a small class is junior high, I suppose. And they'd show her what they were doing, and they said, "Can we use Minecraft in our classes here?" And she said, "Well, you can if you can take these learning objectives that I'm given here. Here they are, and if you can justify using Minecraft with these learning objectives, then yes, we can do it. So here they are. Here's the learning objectives. How can Minecraft help us to do this?" And the students figured it out, and wrote a proposal, and then she started using Minecraft in the ways that met those objectives. So the students taking charge of their learning in a way they wanted to learn. And for language learning, it's we have so many things. There's a lady who she's from Croatia. Her name is Mariana Smolcic, yes, and she has two sons. When Philip was 11 years old, she told me how he had learned English. He was fluent in English, and she was so surprised because she attributed that to Minecraft. So the three of us wrote an article for TESOL EJ, and she interviewed Philip, and I did research on other people who had been using Minecraft in language learning. Jeff Kuhn was one of the people I turned up. Jeff was teaching courses on creative writing, and he was using Minecraft to create chaotic situations which the students could then write about, zombie attacks. But anyway, Mariana I got her to interview her son about how he had a YouTube channel. Everything he did in Minecraft was in English. Actually, I went and visited them in Croatia, and I talked to his brother in Domagoj, the other brother, and her son and the other brother, Domagoj. And they told me that when they started watching videos in Minecraft, it was just, they didn't understand a thing. He said eventually the language emerged. They started understanding it, they wanted to do that. And one of the people that I researched also was using it with students in Turkey. Minecraft has a couple of manuals well known as Green Book, a Red Book. Green is easy, Red Book is a little harder. The Green Book was available in Turkish at bookstores, and the students were interested in Minecraft, and they had the book in the Green Book version in Turkish. This teacher found a bookstore in Istanbul, or wherever he was, that had the red version in English, and he bought that, and he gave it to his son, who was also in the same school. The son took it to school and showed them, but it's in English, okay. And so all of a sudden these things started cropping up. The kids were going out and buying the book and reading it in English. He thought this was the first time he'd ever seen students eat up English so rapidly, So it's something. Jeff Kuhn and I try to get at this in our article, where it's the participatory culture around Minecraft. There's the YouTube videos, the trying to show, the desire to show people what you're doing, to explain to people what you're doing, the intrinsic interest in Minecraft. That is, at Second Life, you go to Second Life and usually you're a participant. You don't really, I just watched a video. There's this virtual media conference going on right now. I was just watching a video where someone gets in a canoe and rides down a river and goes out into the ocean, and there's a shark there. But the guy is just sitting in the canoe. He's not doing anything, It's like an amusement park ride. Monecraft, you're on your feet all the time. You're always creating things. You're always solving problems. You get yourself, monsters come around. You have to be careful because when it gets dark, and it gets dark quickly. Every 20 minutes in Minecraft, it gets dark. And you have to either be safe somewhere, or you have to deal with the monsters. You're constantly solving problems. All the minerals that you need are underground somewhere. You have to go underground and get the minerals, and you build things with them. You build shelters. My idea with my students at the aviation college where I taught, it didn't work well just because the students, they couldn't focus on it. But my idea was that you parachute them into someplace in Minecraft. By the way, I bought a license out of my own money. I couldn't get the school to do it. It's $100, 20 licenses. Minecraft Edu, and I installed those on the computers for the students. And the idea was that that they would go to someplace and invite each other to their. That was where it actually fell down, was because they'd been installing cracking software on the computers, and so the IP addresses had changed, and so the network wasn't working. We had to really ferret in there and figure all this out. But anyway, the idea was to get them all together in a jungle environment somewhere where they would be under attack. They had to develop their perimeter. They had to collaborate and survive. And after that, once you've got yourself established, then you can go out and forage, and you can go out and build other things. You can discover the area. Very compelling environment. And all of this involves language. So, and other subjects as well.
One thing that I wonder in all this gamification is that, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Noam Chomsky's universal grammar theory, and as well some of the psychological processes that people use to learn new language. That we have something called constructs. People actually generate constructs and build upon them. So it's more of a constructionist view of how knowledge is acquired. And there's lots of work been done, and theories postulated. One of the earlier ones in understanding child cognition was Jean Piaget. And then he talks a lot about how we create mental schemas for acquiring this knowledge. How does it actually apply to gamification in context with universal grammar and mental schemas? What do you think is a theory behind successful language acquisition through Minecraft or any other gamification technique for that matter?
Well, you have to distinguish gamification versus game-based learning. And the guy to go to for game-based learning is JPG, GEE. And he developed some very compelling rationales for game-based learning. I have argued that Minecraft is gamified. Gamification in its purest form is where someone wants you to do something by offering you a carrot, and you go and get that carrot. You know, if you post one more podcast, you get this award or something like that. Or you can build it in a Moodle where there's badges. You can give points. People might be motivated to do that. That's gamification. Game-based learning is where you're trying to teach something in the context of a game, but not necessarily with all the rewards. So, but I think Minecraft is very gamified because it may not be that the English or the thing that you're trying to teach is gamified, but that's where it differentiates from game-based learning. But it's got all these built-in rewards. I mean, even your survival is built in, is a reward, because if you cut down a tree, you get logs. You build a crafting table so you can make things from those logs. All of these things, actually, it does have things, you get experience points for killing spiders or something like that. So, but that's gamification. It's very gamified because the rewards are constantly coming at you through your increased ability to do things. So it's kind of a concept that I would think, though, Minecraft is more, it seems to me more, the more I learn about it, it seems to be more game-based learning, because it depends, again, on how you use it. But some teachers capitalize on the fact that there are desert biomes where they have temples in the desert biomes. So you can go and find temples and excavate them. You can teach history through those things. You can geology, not anthropology, but archaeology. However, in the temples, there are chests. Some people like to get into the temples because there are things in the chests in the temples that you can't get unless you go into a temple and get them, like saddles for horses. You can't find those anywhere else. Monsters leave them there or something. But there's also TNT built into the temple, so you have to know how to crack the temple to get into that. Here again, that's the part of the language learning. You collaborate with other people to crack that temple.
Do you think that gamification principles, at least psychologically, are based on the dopamine release? You know, when you win a game, or when you save yourself, or you have coins. So you've got similar games these days also, where you could actually make real money. I think one of those is this game my students played quite often. I just forgot the name. It's a multiplayer role-playing game that you can play on your phones, and there's a lot of exchange of money where you have to buy credits, and then you can communicate with other team members. So there are servers, and
Are you talking about real money?
yes,
Actual
you
money?
actually
Okay.
yes, so you buy credits for that, and then
Uh-huh.
it either gets you different weapons, or you go to different rounds.
World of
And
Warcraft.
It's a very famous game. I don't know. They actually banned that back in November, I believe, in Pakistan also, because that was getting too addictive. Why can't I remember the name?
Well, anyway, okay. So there are.
So the idea is that, do you really believe that a part of it is also the dopamine rush that encourages people to learn language simultaneously when they have to communicate with other, let's say, native speakers or other people in the game as part of the team, and it kind of indirectly incentivizes them to be able to speak English or whatever language they're learning. Do you think that's a part of it?
Definitely. Because dopamine is where addiction comes from, and your ability to control that yourself is your ability to avoid addiction. But
I remember the name game. It's PUBG.
Bobbi, I don't know it. Anyway, Bobbi and I were a little bit late to the session. You were emailing. Come on, guys! It's almost 15 minutes because we were playing Minecraft. That's the dopamine, you see. We couldn't. I was looking at the clock, looking at the Minecraft clock. Oh, but it's almost daylight, and looking at the clock. Oh, and Hodge is waiting, But I mean, so your ability. How far? It's perpetual. It's a game of life, I mean, you go further and further. You it's a game with so much depth. You learn more about it. I learned just recently, after playing for 5 years, that if I want to get interesting materials, I have to go down to level 10. Oh, level 11. Don't go to level 10, because that's where the lava is, and you can introduce lava into your mind. So little things like that you learn about incidentally, that it keeps you learning, and it keeps you interacting, and keeps you reading, because I have to Google things for things that I need to know, and things occur to us all the time. Oh gosh, we just learned this. What if we did this? And okay, so we'll go and try that. And then also, I'm making tutorials for the EVO Minecraft MOOC, so I'm not totally wasting my time. I guess some justification for doing this. But we've set up outposts around the server, and I'm making tutorials where I'm taking people to the different outposts and showing them what I have there. And the idea is to introduce them to using someone who's already done this, but it's also at a low level, because believe me, I'm at a very low level in Minecraft. Some people are making potions. There's a really useful one where you can put a helmet on and you can go underwater and you can breathe there, and that's really amazing to swim around down there when you're trying to get into a temple that's underwater.
I think
somebody, yeah.
This is a very good segue for something very important that you do in your profession as a teacher, and you sit on board of a lot of journals where you have editorial responsibilities. You get to see a lot of papers that have been submitted. We do a lot of work with PhD and postgraduate students, and we get a lot of manuscripts for having a second look. seeing how it makes sense according to their subject. And I believe that you have that quite often also, and I sit on also on an editorial board for International Journal of Distance Research. And we've been talking about this before also. A lot of students come to us with brilliant research. Like it's genuine, it's out of the world. They've gone to extreme lengths to get the data. They write a paper, they're very passionate about that. But when it goes to editorial board, it only gets rejected because of the language. I mean, now things are getting better. People, respond to them and tell them, you need to get to work on your language, make it more understandable, make it more academic and scientific, and it's getting better. But a lot of researchers got discouraged by this. I mean, we have a lot of people coming from China and Malaysia and a lot of other non-English speaking countries who are very frustrated by the lack of skills that would make their papers publishable. And there's nothing wrong with research. What is your experience in dealing with these scenarios where people get discouraged by the editorial remarks on their papers, and there's nothing wrong with the research?
Yeah, we talked about this earlier, and this is the two journals that I'm currently involved in are Computer Assisted Language Learning Journal, CAL Journal, and the other one is TESOL EJ, Teaching English as a Second Language Electronic Journal. So the CAL Journal is a scholarly one where I get a lot of articles submitted to me from, I guess, a lot of Iranian students. A lot of I guess from the articles that come to me, because they're blind, of course. But the references show that indicate pretty strongly that they're from Iran, and they also they seem to be dissertation works, so that someone has done research, and I can just tell the way it's written that they probably got a PhD and they're trying to publish parts of it as an article. And then I've got another one also from somebody from Iran also. We're just about flew in. Who coincidentally from Iran, because I've also had people from China, Taipei in the same situation, who submit their articles, and they're that's for TESOL EJ. I'm the editor of where they're submitting it, so I work with those people closely to try to get them to suggest ways. I work with them very closely, and we make their article together fit what it, we work out all the chinks, as it were. The other one, CAL Journal, I'm on the editorial board, and when the articles are submitted and you read through them, and I always have to make several passes to vet an article, or especially to edit it. I have to make even more passes. So when I read it through, I might get the sense of it, but I can't. One of the categories, you have to fill in a rubric, and one of the categories is language. And if it's not, if you have to give it low marks on language, my suggestion is usually just have a native speaker look at this. So now I saw your video on Ref and Write, and it mentioned Grammarly, which I think I do have a Grammarly account, and Ref and Write looked very interesting as far as, I mean, you could, I don't know if you've had people, has that improved the incidence of acceptance in any of the people that you've tried it with? Has this helped?
Do you mean if people have proofread it for accuracy, or what do you mean?
I mean, from what I gathered from the video, you could take your article in Word, and or with Grammarly, you can put in the plugin, and it should go through using AI techniques to correct it for you, basically, or to suggest. And Ref and Write actually looks for plagiarism or tries to reduce redundancy, things like that. So,
well, Ref and Write is also a Microsoft Word add-in, which actually it's more of a manual thing. It gives you different portions of a research paper with standard lines to get you past the writing block. So for example, if you're writing an introduction or a discussion session or a literature review, it would tell you that how other papers have approached these topics, giving standard lines that you can actually get an idea from and write it in your own words. So it opens a write pane in which all the sections are there, and then you sift through them, and then you see what would be helpful for you. So what they've done is that they've gone through 20,000 papers, and that's a remarkable effort, and then found out different portions within a paper, and then put them together in a sequence to get you started. One more thing it does is that, if you have written papers before, so you have like your 5, 7, or 8 papers that you've written before, so you can upload them into the software, and it's going to suggest what you've written previously from the portion that you're currently working on. That's what you've done before. So if you want to do something similar, that's what you've written before, and now you can build upon that. That's a very interesting tool, yes.
Which one was that you were talking about?
Ref and Write.
Ref and Write. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, but we're talking about someone who's been through that process and now submits the paper and it gets rejected.
Okay.
So using Ref and Write, they still get rejections. Is this right?
Yes, because the problem is that when they do that, either it's a one-off thing, so it can give you sentences, but then you have to match it with each other, like different paragraphs. There's no 100% automation in language writing or language learning. But at some point, you would need to understand the structure of language. I mean, we help them a lot, and things are getting a lot better with these tools. But still, what I'm trying to understand is that when you do get such manuscripts and submissions, how do you deal with them? And do you have any advice for people like these who are about to submit a manuscript?
My advice is, I'll tell you in a moment how I'll go to the advice first and then tell you how I deal with them. The advice is to get a native speaker to read your paper very thoroughly and work with you. It's a very intense process, actually. It's not an easy thing for a native speaker to do, but you need to find a native speaker who can help you clean out all the errors that have been introduced through second language interference or first language interference. But what I do when I get the papers is it depends. I mean, if I see the paper has merit, and sometimes they do have merit. Sometimes they have flaws in the research, which I also have to deal with. And so I could, and generally I'll deal with those flaws first. So I may get a paper and I might notice, because in the rubric covers all these different things, literature search, contribution to the field. So if I find flaws, I might flag those and send it back. And then often the paper comes back to me, hopefully with some of those flaws corrected. Sometimes this takes place over 3 or 4 iterations. And eventually I can get down to the things that are really preventing its acceptance, and that is the way it's written. Now, unfortunately, the editorial, when I first started doing this, I've been doing this editorial board for several journals, and for the one in the Cal Journal for several years, many years. And at first I thought they must have an editorial team, so I didn't really have to worry about language too much. I could tell them I could accept the paper, but inform them that they need to look at the language. But apparently they don't really. I mean, they rely on the writer to get the language down. They're not going to sit there and correct the spellings and put all the these and us in, where they go. So what I started doing is I stopped working full time and I can spend a little bit more time. I've started feeding back on the errors. So I'll go through, and if I notice they're making the same kind of error, I will try to instruct them about the errors. The article system is a really big one because basically English speakers think that if you have to understand what I know and what you know. So when we write or speak, we have this understanding. So if I talk to you about the article I just read, I wouldn't say, it would be incorrect to say an article I just, well, it could be an article I just read. That means that I know about the article, but you don't. If I said the article I just read, that means that you know about it, I know about it. You couldn't leave it off. You couldn't say, I'm going to write about article I just read, because there's something missing there. There are many rules involved, but mainly they come down to what's in my mind and what's in your mind, and those have to match up in the article system. That's a really hard one because, you know, Arabs have a different one. I know Arabic better than I do some other languages.
What's interesting is that it's a very good point, or let's say moment to bring in another question, which is very interesting. Since you've gotten used to Arabic, you've lived there for many, many years, decades, I suppose. I am someone who's learned many languages. Sorry for the shameless self-promotion, but when I was in Sweden, I got to learn Swedish, and during university, I picked up German also. And then when I traveled, I learned other languages also. And the teaching is wonderful. You get to interact with a lot of people who are natively from those countries. And one of the things that I noticed is that when people make mistakes in speaking English, and of course it will always be your second language if it's not your first, it generally comes from some assumptions from your own language and grammar. And some people do not actually have the parallels from one language to another. For example, if I were to give an example from German, it's not only he and she, so they have three pronouns. So there's a neutral one also, so it's die, der, and das. And then verb comes in the end. So if you have two verbs, a helping verb and a final verb, you know, the verb always comes in the end, which is very different from the English structure of subject, verb, and object. Things are different in Romantic languages, in French, where you generally would have with the pronouns. So it's je instead of I have, and they put it together, pronounce it together. Sometimes it's really hard for speakers of French who are learning as a second language to understand if it's together or they meant to say something else. So you have traveled all over the world teaching English, presenting in different conferences and in different events. Can you have you developed some intuition on why people are making mistakes in English? Because it comes from some of the grammatic rules and vocal cords in their own language that are translating over to English, and it has no place in English.
Well, I mean, when I was teaching in Arab countries, I learned Arabic, so I could recognize where that's coming from. And also, I come from Texas, and I speak some Spanish, and I can understand where people are making mistakes that comes from Spanish. I recognize where their first language interference is if I speak that first language, or at least understand some of it. I make a lot of mistakes in French. That's one language I've tried to write a bit, and they're almost all first language interference. So it's not the way we say it in French. That's the way you say it in English. But anyway, but as far as, trying to read articles that are submitted for publication, it's hard, really. Maybe it would be great if you could develop some AI solution for it that would put things into would just understand the article system. That would be a good place to start. And that probably would take care of 50% of the very non-native flavor things that you just can't get away with in an article. It just identifies that as being a little bit strange, and also it's also a communication problem. It's communicative. It has meaning implications. So, it's really hard though to get a handle. I mean, there are obviously humorous stories you can tell about people, understanding people or misunderstanding people. There's lots of stories you can tell. But if you want to talk about evaluating their papers for publication, then there's no real one size fits all. And I think, frankly, the solution is get a native speaker, pay them, make good friends with them. I don't know, how you do it. Arrange a quid pro quo, but you really need to have a native speaker look at your work if you don't want to have this problem. And Cal Journal is kind of good about this because they believe strongly that they're contributing to the field if they help authors to get their works published, and they'll send it back. They want one reviewer to stay on that work. I actually hate this, but that's the plan. They want one reviewer to stay on the work and keep looking at it over and over again. And but I don't know. I get a little frustrated with that. Depends on how interested I am in the work, but
I do understand, it can get a little boring when you actually have to fix simple mistakes over and over again. Nothing interesting about that. Which brings me to a very interesting off-topic point now. I mean, there's one part of your personality, which is your work and your accomplishments and your publishing. Their other side is that you get to spend a very interesting unique life, which is you left home, what was it, in 70s or 80s, and then you lived most of your life in Gulf, and then you've traveled around this globe, teaching English, meeting people, accumulating a lot of experiences. Your children also now live in Qatar, and then they chose to live there instead of going back home or any other part of the world. You must have gathered a lot of experiences, sociocultural experiences, both for the good and for the bad. Tell us a little bit about how is it that what are the challenges of living in a different culture for a longer time, and then still see the good in that and make the choice.
Sometimes things just fall into place. You say one door closes, another door opens, so if you leave home, you can still get back, but then after too long a time, that door is a little harder to get back. And meanwhile, other doors are opening ahead of you. And so, life circumstances, I suppose, has just dictated. We really had to make a decision when we left the UAE. Either we go back to Texas, or we had an opportunity because one of my sons was marrying a girl from Malaysia to move to Malaysia. Really, we had to decide: do we want to go? Where do we want to live? And I mean, there's so many considerations: politics, economics. So many issues going on in America right now. And meanwhile, part of it is, what we actually did was we built up a path that we could go to Malaysia if we wanted to. And so I wouldn't say we really cut off the American option, but when the time came, and it comes quickly, you've got to go this way or that way. And we had made the Malaysian path, and we thought, okay, we'll go there and we'll see how it works out. And then we ended up in a really nice place, and the money is going well, and the health insurance is much better here than it would be in the United States. So there's so many considerations. Our kids are in this part of the world. They come to Malaysia every now and then. Nobody can go anywhere because of COVID. But anyway, so kind of like the environment here as it is. And my kids also, as I mentioned, there's something called third culture kids. They grew up in, when we were living in Arab countries, they grew up going to school in these really nice environments because they're international, and there weren't any discipline hassles. No one's carrying guns around, shooting people, anything like that. And it's a very happy place to grow up. We had decent jobs. We weren't making a lot of money like business people. We were teachers, but still things were provided for us. And so we had very nice expat lives. And when the kids wanted to go to college, well, actually with Glenn, our first one, we'd gone back to California, as we mentioned. We were living in California when he had to go to college. So he decided to stay in California and do that. And then with our son, Dusty, he decided to go back to America and go to college. And at the time, we had no connection with America. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the foreign, resident tuitions in America. They're sort of designed so that residents of states can have an easy time of it. Dusty didn't qualify, but he wanted to go to school there. And so we spent a lot of money on that. But in any event, both of them decided after they just weren't fitting in. They weren't fitting in because they'd become third culture kids. They had left that culture far enough to where their peers didn't really accept them. They weren't interested in the same things. They had a more, you can use the word Catholic perspective, which means open-minded, eclectic. They were more eclectic in their thinking, and whereas kids there were sort of into their silos. So they both came back and lived with us. They both moved in with us for a time until they met their wives and moved off into their other things. They both ended up in Doha. They live near each other, and so we used to go there often. And we've got grandchildren there, so we haven't really been able to get there. I think they were here last Christmas, which is coming up, and we usually see each other at Christmas. But anyway, hopefully next year we'll be able to restore some of these connections.
I think it's very interesting and kind of hopeful to know that what we traditionally saw in Western countries as bastion of free speech and openness, and now that tide is kind of shifting where people actually do not fit in because of the lack of openness that your children actually felt when they went back to study. And it's also kind of concerning that people can get cheaper quality education outside U.S. than the other way. So I think it's a fact that Obama actually paid his student debts in the first year of his presidency, which is very foreign to a lot of people around the world, where there aren't huge student debts to be able to study. So it's a nice development for some. If you think about it, that a lot of other countries are becoming more open with these Western countries were known for at some point. Now, what are your future plans? Are there any projects that you're working on at the moment? What do you do now? How does your day look like?
Well, I do a lot of what I'm doing right now. I'm sort of trying to pull back a little bit from a lot of the things that take a lot of my time, because I've noticed that I think things that you commit to take all the available time. And when you're working a job full time, you put half your time into that, and then the other half goes into your projects, and then you have to break off and sleep every now and then. I thought when I retired, I would have time to kind of coalesce, sort of do some of the things that I've been having on the back burner for some time. But I haven't really had a chance to do that. So what I've decided I need to do is kind of break some of the commitments that are taking a lot of my time regularly, and then get more focused on some of the things that I would really like to do. And so I don't really know. I'm getting, when you asked me about this, I said I have some journals that I kept when I was traveling in the 70s, traveling to Europe, Europe, Africa, Middle East, traveling around those countries. They're quite interesting, but I've never had a chance to get down and make them into publishable. So that's actually one thing I'm trying to break away and do. Bobbi said that she's scanning a lot of photographs. So at this time of life, it's kind of time to make sure if you're going to do something, if you plan to do something for some time, maybe it's a good time you should do it.
And you told me about this unfortunate incident where you fell off of a mountain, and you used to play guitar. Is it going to be anytime soon? Are you healed now?
Oh yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't think you can really tell. Let's see, it was this one. One of them is a little bit crooked. We had a guide. The guide wanted us to traverse very slowly. Put your foot here, put your foot here. I thought, oh, come on, I can just do this. I'll just go down. So I had poles. Bobbi gave me a pole. She insisted I take this pole, and it was that pole, when I slipped eventually, that came up and broke that little finger. But don't worry, I don't blame Bobbi. Anyhow, that's what impacted my guitar playing. I don't really play guitar as much as I used to, so I think it sort of broke something I was on. But anyway, that's
it was. You also did a lot of scuba diving back when you were in Abu Dhabi, and I think I do have a picture from the time that we met back in Abu Dhabi. So that was the younger you.
Yeah, the younger you. I'm glad to see that you've become a lot more handsome.
Have I? Apart from putting a little bit of weight, I think you look a little similar.
Both of us look more handsome now. Isn't it wonderful? And Bobbi too. She's much more beautiful.
I guess it doesn't always stand to the test of time. The proverb that age with age you become older.
Yeah, I don't know. It's how comfortable you feel, and I think we were all young at the time, and you were the youngest, and it's really nice to hook up with you again. And actually, you're interviewing me, but I would like very much to find out more about what you're doing. Maybe I could interview you. I could talk about the things that you're into. I think they would be even more interesting than talking to me. But we could do that another time if you want.
Sure, I was thinking about it, and we did talk about it earlier, that I would want to actually, participate in any of the events of Learning Together or EVO. It's been quite some time. It would be nice to actually catch up with a lot of people and see what you guys are up to, and I would definitely love to share what I'm up to. But with that, thank you so much. I think I'm holding you off for quite some time now, so I'll let you go, but thank you so much for being here today. learned a lot from you over the years, and that's true for a lot of other people who have learned from you. I've actually met a lot of people from this community on my travels around the world. I did tell you about Anki that I met in Slovenia, and it was a very small village. So I was hitchhiking across Europe when I met her in a small village called Pitui. It's a wonderful city, and she was teaching.
Was she? You said you met her through couch surfing. Was she providing the accommodation?
Yes, but I had already met her before, online, working in these English communities. I wouldn't have known her without the community that we're working on. So it's been very thrilling journey. And thank you and Bobbi and all others who have made that possible. And thank you for making a difference in the world.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to talk to you again and find out where you've gotten to. Obviously, you're doing some very significant things. We'll find more about those when we get together again.
Will do. With that, we're going to finish. Leave it at that here, and please do tune in for the next episode. I've left the link, and I'm going to leave that in the description for the YouTube video. Also, for you to go to Vance's website, check out his papers and his books, and everything else. Thank you so much. Bye.